Welcome to another episode of the Waffle Shop podcast. Today I'm joined by Tom Stroud, who, if you're living under a rock, you probably haven't seen it, but he's currently starring in Netflix Love is Blind UK Series 1, which is quite possibly taking the world by storm, I'd say at this point. And fellow mellow mental health advocate, Tom Stroud. Welcome to the Waffle Shop.
Thank you, Taylor. I'm so happy to be here. I was just chatting to Taylor earlier about I've done a few podcasts this week and a few media things, but this is the one that I'm most excited about because we'll talk about the show a little bit, and that's great. But it's really, really important to me the kind of broader topics that the show's presented around mental health in men in particular.
Now, you do realise I'm going to listen to the other ones to see if you've said exactly what you've just said to me. So just checking.
My conscience is clear, Taylor. Okay, listen away. I need the views.
No, I appreciate it. No, it is important, and I think this is why, we said it before I hit the record button. There were certain parts of your story that even recently, when I've seen like on social media, like of you being so open and vulnerable, I was like, I need to talk to this guy because we'll dive into it like further on in the episode, but there is so many aspects of the stuff that you're talking about now that are like, yes, we've come a long way, but we still need to be talking about it. Before we dive into all that, just to get the moan out the way, I do start each one of my shows with something called the Weekly Waffle, which is something that's quite frankly got on my nerves, that when I speak to my guests about it, it makes me feel that little bit better. So obviously feel free to get involved. But what has bothered me this week, Tom, is, and to be fair, I need to be careful how I say this, but next to the podcast studio, there is a skateboard ramp. And I'm finding myself getting really fascinated by skateboarders, but it's just the thought of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on this skate ramp that I'm just kind of, I'm finding it quite hypnotizing, but two, I'm just like, is that not the definition of insanity? Just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, I'm not taking shots at people who skateboard, but I was just watching it like, why?
What was it? That's an Albert Einstein quote, isn't it? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting something different. But I've got to say, Taylor, I've got to back up my fellow boarders here. I grew up in Brighton and I was a massive skateboarding fan as a kid. So, and there is some like nuance and skill to what they're doing, I promise you. So I mean, maybe this is a chance for you to release your inner child, Taylor, and have a go and join them.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm watching out the window like, I wish I could have done that. Maybe now's the time. Obviously, it's on my doorstep, so I might as well actually give it a go.
It's never too late, and I'm looking forwed to your new career as a professional skateboarder in the next Olympics.
Scrapping the podcast in. I'll see you in LA. Is there anything that gets on your nerves that you'd quite like to share with us today and get off your chest?
Yeah, lots. I mean, I have a strong point of view on just about everything, but I think the one thing that I want to... Yeah, absolutely. You should do, back yourself. But the one thing that I want to raise is kind of, I suppose, relevant to the show a little bit, really. Like when you're on a show like Love is Blind, you put yourself out there completely for the whole world to see and judge and make their own opinions on, I guess. And I think quite a lot of the cast have suffered a lot with, I mean, there'll be a better phrase than internet trolls, but let's call it internet trolls at the moment. I don't have any issue at all with people expressing their own views. In fact, like I embrace it. I've talked a lot about having different opinions and actually how different opinions, and taking on board those opinions is how we grow as people. But my frustration is where you might have people that have certain opinions or certain views and don't understand what's informed those views. Because I always think I try and interrogate every single thing that I think and have an opinion on and having a judgment on. So probably internet trolls would be my personal perspective.
No, but do you know what? I think it's a solid one. And to be fair, I think it's an incredible kind of place to start with it, because one of the first questions was obviously going to be for me, like, why would you go on like a show? Well, not like why you would go on a show. That sounded really negative. But going on to a show like that, there is an opinion that you're almost setting yourself up for that. But when it goes to the extreme that you are seeing at the moment, like, you've seen the horror stories, you've seen what happens in the news, then all of a sudden it's this whole kind of be kind conversation that creeps in. It's just like, but we are also part of the problem. Like, yes, you have gone on a TV show, you know, for whatever reason. Like, why would you not want to do something that is going to challenge you? Like, get out the comfort zone. It's an exciting opportunity and thing to be a part of. But I don't agree with it. I do not agree with the extremes that it goes to. Like, you're human. So regardless of what has been said to you, like some of it is going to stick. How have you handled some of it? Like, obviously you're very in the public eye at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
How are you navigating it?
There's a lot I want to say on that question and a lot to unpack. I mean, to answer the direct perspective, like the social media, let's say fallout is really, it's really difficult, and it's been difficult for everybody. I think like no one in the show has had, well, very few of us have had like a perfect edit where you're shown to be the perfect human being all the way through, and that's what human beings are, right? We're not perfect. We all have our flaws and things that we need to work on. I think the crazy thing about the show and the reason for its success is that all of these talking points and topics, they're relevant to everyone. So my storyline, for example, and this whole kind of narrative around finances and relationships, where I have a view which was very different to my fiance Maria, and my view is that that there should be kind of fair contributions in a relationship when it comes to finance. But what you start to understand is because it's about love and because it's about relationships, everyone can identify with those talking points. So therefore, everyone has an opinion. And that's what's difficult is that, I mean, the amount of comments that I had when this storyline was going out around like stingy, tight, like that sort of fairly justified stuff. And then all the way through to like, he must be a homosexual because he can't support a woman. And I was like,
wow,
firstly, you don't understand the irony in using homosexuality as an offensive term. Like, you
yeah,
know, be more inclusive. You know, but secondly, it's amazing that you've taken that jump. And I think for a lot of people, it kind of holds a bit of a mirror up to their own lives and their own insecurities, I guess. But it is really, really surprising to see how angry and frustrated people get on social media. And I suppose that was the only thing that really left a bit of a taste in my mouth. And I think the rest of the cast would say the same thing. You know, it's like, as someone who I hope is quite self-reflective and doesn't allow myself to sort of get overly emotional, whether it's a positive or negative emotion, but really think about where those emotions are coming from. Like, I'm like, just do a bit of work on yourself before you go away, you know, slagging off people on social media based
yeah.
off an edited TV show, which probably isn't actually reflective of the truth of what went down.
Well, I suppose there's like hours and hours of content and film that wasn't shown. Like, you know, I've had people on the show before who have been like on like Love Island, they're
Mm-hmm.
like Geordie Shore, like all these kind of things. And they've said the same thing. Like there's lots of things that like you are not going to see. Like, but the basis of the show is like as much as yes, there's contestants going on to like find love,
Mm-hmm.
it's an entertainment show.
Yeah.
So if this was people and it was all lovey-dovey from start to finish, those people who are pointing the finger now, they wouldn't watch the show. So it's this kind of like the dramatic, the kind of like the storylines, like the way people are being portrayed
Mm.
is for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
honestly, I don't know how you I did one a few years ago. I went on a date on a TV show and I got called Mr. Tumble and it hurt. I mean,
God.
obviously, I know that you're having a lot more harsh comments said about you. But yeah, it hurts.
It
Like
does.
we're
It does.
human.
Oh God. And I think we should hold on to that point, Taylor, because I do really want to talk about like ego and trying to disregard the opinions of other people, but like you do take that stuff on board. And I think it's, you'd be lying if you said you didn't.
Yeah,
But you are right. I think that's what people need to be mindful of. Like there's a certain format that needs to fit. And do you know what? Like my journey, there were things in there which I really wasn't proud of. And you know, there was
yeah,
one particular storyline around me being quite judgmental of Maria's career and her income, and you know, I've had a lot of time to reflect on that, and I was wrong to do that, and it's really good. And honestly, I winced when I saw that stuff back because like whilst they edit it to make it more dramatic than it was, that did happen.
Yeah.
My concern with those shows, I guess, is when they tell a story which is completely different from what actually went down. And it was interesting because our wedding day, you know, the way that they edited made it look like I'd kind of jilted her at the altar and just walked away. And you know, the reality was it was a mutual decision, and that's
Yeah.
since come out in the press, and I'm thankful that it has. But by that point, you've had 2 days of like
Well,
absolute
abuse, really.
shock and
Like,
awe. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly on your
coming
social
through to
channels.
you.
And the problem is with the nature of a show like that, like given the audience is so global, like once that's gone out, that there's no coming back from it. So, and
Yeah.
I really feel for a lot of the other cast because they've had it much worse than I have. And you know, Steve's going through it at the moment with this story and with
Yeah.
Sabrina, and is having a lot of shit. And I'm like, almost, you know, regardless what happened, just bear in mind that they are people. We all are people, and it's okay to have opinions, like I said, but maybe just be a bit more measured
Yeah.
about it.
With the pros, obviously, like you said, like, and I love the fact that you're using words like being like reflective. And one of the reasons straight away, when as soon as you mentioned the ego word, I was like, even more, I need to talk to this guy, because it's something that has kind of been creeping up in my own journey, especially recently, where I'm almost becoming a bit uncomfortable with life at the moment, because there's a bit of a growth period. There's a mirror that I'm holding up to myself at the moment, saying like, if I want those things, I need to do better. Like, I can't keep going through these kind of things, making these kind of assumptions or opinions, when actually I'm that person. I'm that person that I'm kind of nitpicking at, that I need to address this. So it was so refreshing to hear someone else kind of like, can we almost talk about this? Um, with what's your view on ego? Because obviously, what does, I guess, if you look about Tom before the show, now Tom's obviously come through the, I don't know what I'm talking to you as if you're not here. But now, has there been almost like a learning process that you have gone through? And how do you view the word ego now coming through the other side of the edit?
I love this question. And so ego for me, right, is that's your own sort of sense of worth or your own sense of importance. It's the perception you have of yourself, right? And so I've got a massive ego, and sometimes it takes me over, and I struggle to be reflective, and I struggle to almost put myself into other people's shoes, and you know, try and really delve into why they're thinking a certain way. And you know, when you have situations like conflict with friends and family, like the best thing you can ever do is take your ego out of it and the fact that you've been criticized or hurt, and try and look at it from their point of view. You know, it's probably the most healthy tip that I could give anyone in any kind of relationship, romantic or otherwise. But you know, if ego is about your self-worth, then I can really, really track that. And I'm going to go a bit deep now, if that's all right. But
Yes,
like,
what we're here for.
good. I'm pleased about that. Some of the podcasts I've done this week haven't been that deep, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, so like,
No shade.
if we,
No shade.
well, no shade, no shade intended.
But this is the one that we deep dive.
Good. I'm really happy about that. So, because when we think about ego, like ego, your own sense of worth or purpose comes from a bunch of different factors. And for me, one of the big factors is what I do for work. You know, it's my job. You know, I was someone that when I grew up had a very poor opinion of myself, and that really. I remember when I first started working in PR and advertising, it's full of these big, confident characters, and I just thought I wasn't good enough. I thought I wasn't worthy, and I'd sort of have so many situations where I'd get good feedback, and I'd disregard that and just pick holes in myself, and even pick holes in that feedback. So when I got into my 30s and I started doing therapy, and I started to realize actually you are pretty good at this, and you should take a lot of joy and accomplishment out of that. It almost went too far the other way, and it became like too much of my being was like, right, I've got this job which, you know, can come up with really cool ideas for brands, and you know, like stand in front of people and manage teams and do all that kind of stuff. And I thought I got carried away and thought that was every part of me. And there was a point in my 30s where I almost lost sight of all the other things which contribute to who you are. So like your relationships with your friends and your family. And it was only really when both my parents and my mum and my stepdad got pretty sick about a couple of years ago. I basically had to put all of my work on hold and had to go back and kind of care for them. And, you know, at one point it was touch and go whether either of them were going to make it. And whilst it was a horrible time, like the silver lining for me was it really made me realize or reappraise what was important. And of course, work is still a big contribution in who I am, but it's not the only thing. So to bring it back to the show, when that sort of judgmental stuff came about, that was almost like my 20-year-old self, or even my child self, being like, I'm big and important, because I have this, like, job and these goals and aspirations, and this reaction came out of me where I was like, I don't think that person meets them. But actually, the mistake I made was, firstly, I didn't interrogate it. I made a snap judgment of Maria's occupation based off no information whatsoever.
Mm.
And secondly, I got my priorities wrong. And it was really interesting because, when you're thinking about what you're looking for in a partner, like, you have to align priorities. That is important. But I feel like I got that bit wrong. I don't think that someone's income or occupation is as important as their values. And that's the big learning that I took from the show.
I think, do you know what, mate? It's an incredibly powerful thing to be able to sit. I think, especially like as a man, to admit that you made a mistake. Like, you weren't the first, and you will most certainly will not be the last. But regardless of who you are, but I do find it quite fascinating, especially when you go through something where you have quite a low self-worth, low self-esteem, to kind of developing yourself to a stage where you almost play a character. You almost kind of have this false sense of reality, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's your job, whether it's the way other people view you. I want to dive back a little bit. When you were growing up, why? I mean, obviously, you're on this kind of like journey at the moment. Why were those thoughts of like low self-esteem, low self-worth, like where did that kind of manifest from, or has it just kind of been like a slow bubbling thing?
Nice. I'm really happy to talk about this stuff because I think it's important, and I think there are lots of men and women that will probably identify with this idea. Like, when I was growing up, I had a dad who he just wasn't around at all. Like, him and my mum broke up when I was 4, and I'd see him sporadically, once or twice a year, maybe. I just yearned for his attention, his affection, his love, and it wasn't something which was reciprocated. And so that made me feel very early on in my life like I wasn't worth anything, and I felt very rejected and abandoned. And kids deal with that stuff in different ways, and you can't blame any kid for how they deal with it. Some kids really retreat
Yeah.
into their shell,
It's the same as grief, isn't it? It's the same,
uh,
like, no, I don't think there's anyone say like, this is how you grieve. This is a process on how to do it. It's like, it's very personable to you.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. It's what I say to people now. Like, however people want to deal with it, like, let them. That's okay. But the way that I dealt with it was through anger and through lashing out, and I was a pain in the ass as a kid. And my mum was like a single mum. She had to work to provide for us. It must have been really hard for her. But yeah, so I had an episode with my father when I was 10 or 11 where I got taken into a social services meeting because I was so angry and upset. And but long and short was he ended up taking me in as a kid, and I ended up living with him for a year. And for me, it was the best year of my life. But looking back on it, my mum would have been absolutely petrified because I was like a little teenage tearaway living with him in this like council estate in West London. And for one reason or another, that didn't end up working out. He basically did a runner. And so I had to go back and live with my mum. My life completely changed. And so that feeling at that age, like the core memory I have of like going back after I'd been on holiday with my mum to go and live with him again, and he'd just disappeared, is something which will stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And then
That's a
throughout my
tough one,
teenage,
mate.
it
Really
was
tough.
really hard.
Thank you for sharing that. That can't be easy even just to talk about again.
It's
I
like,
appreciate that.
it's, and this is the thing about therapy, right? You go through these things and you deal with them again and again and again. And you get to a point where you're quite comfortable talking about them. So, and the challenge I had in my teenage years was that the other sort of men in my life that were meant to be these kind of role models, aspirational figures, were just shit. So it was like my mum's partners, or my uncle, who was an amazing man, incredibly charismatic guy, but had his own demons. And he committed suicide when I was 17. And so even that was like selfishly another form of rejection, right? So when you have a childhood like that, where you're just pocketed with all this rejection and abandonment, it
There's
completely
also a lot
alters
of
your view.
loss there as well.
Oh,
A lot
but
of loss there, which is difficult to navigate at any age. So even as a child who is growing up you're still figuring out who you are at that age. You know, everyone's kind of to some degree has that difficult relationship with their parents. They kind of like rebel, they kind of like push them away. But then you've got this almost this sense of yearning that as much as you kind of like being a bit rebellious, the only thing you actually want is a hug from your parents to be like, you're going to be all right. So that's quite a cocktail of emotions that you must have been dealing with.
Yeah. And I mean, I always think like having an absent parent or feelings of rejection or abandonment are the same as loss. Like it all stays in that same bracket. And I remember, I'm sure that there'll be people listening in who can understand this. Like at times, just wishing that my dad was dead because it would have been easier for me to understand and move on from. But it's almost like I'm mourning this person that is still alive, right? And that's really hard. So, you know, and the reason why I wanted to come on today was because I know that there are so many people in this same situation that probably really struggle to make sense of their emotions, and because it is hard to deal with. And
yeah, I'm gonna say something now that I don't think I've actually ever said on the podcast, but I feel like what you just said is touched a nerve, but in a good way, in terms of like I've never heard someone else articulate what you've just said before in a conversation. A few years ago, obviously people who listen to the show will know the story and why the podcast started. And my mum's now in a neurological care home. She was a single parent. She pretty much raised me to the man that I am today. Whereas my dad just kind of like waltzed away. And I've got a very turbulent relationship with my dad. Well, I did have. Now I can't give it any more time because I know now through therapy that I'm enough. I can give myself what I need as a man. And there is so many times when I wish this had happened to him. I wish it was my dad that was lying in that neurological care home and not my mum. And you almost feel sick saying those kind of things out loud because you feel like a real horrible person. But at the same time, like there is that it's almost like a childish thing to say. And I think it is that kind of, it comes from that inner child inside thinking that, well, I wish you were this, I wish you were that, because that's probably what would hurt them if you were to say it to them. But also, again, through therapy, like I learned that it's okay to feel like that. It's a thought. Obviously those thoughts can't be acted on because stuff like that is completely out of like our control. But it's okay to kind of feel that kind of like anger, like it's an emotion, just the same way like you feel happy, the same way you feel sad. Like I think the important bit is the outlet of it. And as long as obviously we're talking about it now, that in some sense is an outlet for it. So yeah, I actually feel oddly emotional that you've just said that, but I am actually very grateful for it because I think we're not the only two people who have ever felt like that towards someone else in some capacity, whether it's a parent, whether it's any form of relationship. So I massively appreciate you saying that, mate.
No, you're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your story as well, Taylor. I just think for men in particular, like men really struggle to understand the impact that this stuff has on them. I think women, generally speaking, are a bit more emotionally intelligent than guys are, right? And
100%. I was raised by women, mate. I know for a fact that they are way more emotionally intelligent than us.
Same. I was as well. And it's really interesting. Do you see like other parts of your life where being raised by women either has a positive impact or a negative impact? Because I see it all the time. 100%.
Like my little sister, like I pretty much raised her from everything. Well, I had very heavy influence in her life growing up anyway. But then when everything happened with my mom, it was just the two of us. She is that one voice that really humbles me, puts me in my place, and to be like, yeah, I've got some of the most incredibly inspiring women around me, and they scare the shit out of me.
As they should do. As they should do. So, but this is the really interesting thing for me. Like the way that manifested itself in my adult life was like this innate distrust of men in authority positions. And I really struggled in the workplace because of that, because I'd have male managers and I just wouldn't trust them. I either wouldn't trust them because I'd be like, they're trying to build a relationship with me and they're just going to fuck me over because of my childhood, or I wouldn't trust them because I didn't feel that their opinions were as valid as female opinions were, because I'd never really had anyone that had gained that trust in me personally. And I've always gotten on with women better than I have guys. But a big part of like a big load of the trolling that's occurred recently has been about Tom grew up in a single parent family by a mum. How could a mum possibly ever raise a man by herself? And I'm like, it's hilarious to me because I know that, the attributes that I've learned from my mum, like compassion, empathy, communication, all those kind of stuff, like those
Yeah.
things are for me what a modern man is.
Well, it is. We've learnt more how to be like a man from a woman.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same, like even like your experience on your show, obviously you've entered into this kind of like TV show and obviously you've created this like relationship. And obviously the lessons that you're now taking from that is like, well, I shouldn't be judgmental. Like I should be more like empathetic to people's situations. I shouldn't be almost as opinionated as I should be. It's okay to have those opinions, but the way you kind of, I guess, portray them or communicate them. So
Yeah.
even now, we're taking the lessons from the women.
Exactly. That's it. So, it's, yeah. So, and that's the thing, man. Like I've bashed the show quite a bit already, and I don't mean to at all. It's just the way that the conversation has gone. But I think you're in a pretty good place, and you've done the work when you can look back on something which at times has been quite traumatic or stressful, and say I took a lot of good out of it because I learned more about myself.
Yeah, and to me, that's what it's about. That's where the growth is, and that's almost when life gets fun, when you're able to take those lessons and actually put it into action.
Exactly.
We talk about coping mechanisms quite a lot on the show. I've developed some of mine by having conversations like this. When things do get particularly tough, or there's a lot of chaos going on in your world, what do you lean on to kind of get you through the storm?
Yeah, good question. Great question. I mean, the obvious one is talking to people, and but I think it's really, really good to actually interrogate that a bit further because my personal point of view is talking to loved ones is amazing because it makes you feel grounded and it makes you remember who you are and what value you bring to them and those relationships. But the one caveat on that I'd say is your loved ones they're biased. They're biased towards you. And sometimes like I want someone to be like, you fucked up there. These are the reasons why you fucked up. Am I allowed to swear? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do
it. These are the reasons why you fucked up, and these are the steps you need to take to not fuck up again. Rather than my mum being like, "Tom, I thought you were absolutely amazing there, where you called Maria judge, or you judged Maria's job."
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's where therapy is so important because you have an unbiased view. And I mean, I don't know about you, and obviously, Tony, you've done a lot of therapy. When I first started doing therapy, I thought that part of it was about getting the validation of the therapist and making them like you. And then you realize that actually it's the worst thing you can do because you present a filtered version of yourself based off what you think they want to hear. And it's only really when you start telling them the stuff that you have deep shame and embarrassment about, that's when you get the good stuff out of it,
Yeah. Well, it's the mirror again, isn't it? Being held up. I went into therapy almost convinced I was a narcissist because I was so worried about like, it was, I think it's because I was so self-aware that when I was kind of like questioning things, I was like, well, I'm making this whole situation about me. And it wasn't like I've learned in therapy. It's not that I've made it about me. It's because I can relate so much. I'm such an empathetic person that I can really put myself in someone else's shoes. You raised a very, very good point there, which I think really, I guess, kind of continues the ego conversation, is that when you were around yes people and friends and family, I do strongly agree with you. They have a biased opinion of you. Obviously, they're going to be very protective of you. So they're almost not going to tell you what you need to hear. So obviously, and from personal experience, like when I've been around people who are constantly saying, you're smashing it, you're doing well, this, that, and the other, words, in my gut, I know something is off. It feeds into that ego. I was like, well, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to do anything differently. I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to challenge myself because what I'm doing right now in the people that I'm speaking to is absolutely fine. So why would I change? Whereas it comes back to the false reality and, you know, you have a conversation like this and we're actually like, no, there is still a lot of work to be done. There's someone who obviously our paths have crossed now, but if we hadn't kind of gone through what we went through, they might never have. But the human element of it, like we're all feeling those kind of emotions of like, I don't know, ego, like anxiety, you know, all these kind of different kind of cocktail of stuff. I went off of a bit of a tangent then, but like it was, again,
love a tangent.
you were dangerous to talk to because I feel like this is going to turn into like part 5, 6, 7, and 8. So coping mechanisms, you've got obviously therapy, you've got obviously talking.
Yeah.
Like so, what else are you leaning on?
Well, do you know what, right? And it's really interesting because when you asked me that question, my immediate reaction was like, oh God, like what are my coping mechanisms? And I think a big part of the problem with a lot of the advice that you get today, particularly on social media, is people associate coping mechanisms with these faddy words. So things like mindfulness, things like gratitude practice, things like journaling, and they're all so valid. But I think what a lot of people struggle with is actually understand the reasons why you do that stuff. That's certainly something that I did, you know, because I'm not going to say that I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, do an hour's meditation, do my gratitude journaling. Like that's not what I do. I get out of bed at 8:15, like chuck my clothes on, have a shower and leg it to work, you know, but I think it's really interesting to interrogate the reasons why they're important. And, you know, for me, right, journaling, gratitude practice, that is about using writing as a means to get your thoughts out of your brain. And it really is that simple. And when you break it down like that, right, think about how you take advice from other people, right? You might speak to your mum, you might speak to your best mate, and you're then getting your feelings out to someone else external and receiving something back. When you write something down, you've got something on paper which you can then reflect back on and look at it as a third party. So it's not in your brain anymore. You can look at it as someone who might give advice to yourself. And that's why writing stuff down has been so amazing for me. Like, honestly, I have this technique which is called, when I want to do a bit of deep diving, it's called I Remember. And it's amazing. And I just write down, I remember. And then all I do is write down 3 things that I remember. It might be from my past, might be from, you know, more recent years. So it might be, I remember my 4th birthday party. And then I'm like,
so there's no prompt. It's just what comes into your head at that time.
Exactly that. So, and then I'm like, why do I remember my 4th birthday party? And then I think, oh, it's because my mum baked me a Thomas the Tank Engine cake and she spent all day on it. And that's the bit that I remember. And then immediately, like, I love my mum. Like, and that's where the gratitude comes from because she did something amazing for me, you know? So that's why I think writing's really important.
That is powerful, mate.
I'm
taking that. That is brilliant.
And it takes 2 minutes. Like, that's the thing. And so, yeah, like mindfulness again is, you know, oh my God, like the amount of shit you see on the internet around.
No.
Honestly. And I think it's so like, what's the right word here? It's so confusing for anyone, but men in particular, to look at that and think like, how does that even relate to me? It looks like some sort of woo-woo hippie type person, life coach of a life coach in Bali talking about mindfulness. And actually the principle is the principle. It's trying to get rid of all of the clutter in your brain so that you can just take a very, very simple view and clear it all out. And that's it. And that's what I really want to do. Like people, you know, talk about the platform.
But I think people need to hear it though. They need to hear it because I think when you talk about like self-care, mindfulness, all these kind of things, I think people think it needs to be like these big grand gestures of like going to the spa, going on a 5K run. Like if that works for you, crack on. There's no one, I'm not saying here it's the wrong thing to do. If it works, it gets you through your day, puts a smile on your face, go for it. But we've just spoke about a technique that is as simple as sitting down with a pen and paper, tools that pretty much are global to anyone, and talking about the stuff that you remember. Why do you remember? Something so simple. And before you know it, you've probably got 2-3 pages worth of stuff that has kind of been clogging up your head. And the clarity that you get after those kind of sessions with your night journal, honestly, it just frees up the mind to be able to like focus on that thing that you've been putting off.
Yeah.
Or the thing or the conversation that you haven't wanted, like, or you've been almost having anxiety around that certain topic or a conversation that you didn't want to have with someone.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, once you've kind of got it out of your head, seen it in front of you, you're like, okay, now I know how to articulate it. Now I know how to not make it an argument. I can make it a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Exactly.
God, you're on fire.
Woo! I mean, there's a couple of other things that I'll talk about because, like, and again, this is wanky stuff, which is just translated into like basic bitch language for myself because I need basic bitch language.
Was it translation?
Like, well, yeah. But there's one thing that my therapist taught me, which is just about writing down a very, very simple like mantra, which you say back to yourself at the end of the day. And again, mantras like exclusionary language. It's just something which you truly believe about yourself that you repeat to yourself at the end of every day. And for me, you know, particularly in this period in my life, and wanting to talk about mental health, it's something as simple as like your opinion matters and you can add value to others. And if you just write down something like that and say it when you after you brush your teeth every day, eventually it goes in there and it stops those insecurities. The thing that I'm struggling with the most at the moment, if I'm being really honest, is like people aren't going to like what I have to say. Like a lot of people didn't on the show. My opinion is valid, and it's quite hard to battle through that stuff sometimes.
I think it's a difficult space to navigate, even if you're not in the public eye. I think everyone has that desire and that wanting to be liked and loved and like viewed a certain way. On the back of that kind of, also the mantra thing's absolutely spot on. By the way, I'm taking that as well. I'll take those headphones as well, actually. But it's around this kind of question around social media. It's not even a question. I think it's quite a beautiful tool, but it's also incredibly dangerous. I wanted to ask your opinion on it now, because obviously you work in that kind of space. So obviously you see these campaigns going live. You're bringing the client's ideas, but you're also now, there's a huge finger pointing at you, I guess. So you're under a spotlight, I probably should say. How has your view on social media changed, or is it still, are you starting to see like a much darker side of it now? I guess you're in the spotlight.
Great question. And lots to say on that. So, like, broadly speaking, maybe from kind of a work point of view and an awareness of how it works point of view, like, I didn't realize when you have like a limited following, you exist in your bubble. And like, there are a lot of people whose egos are like, I want to get my voice out to a wider audience, but it is genuinely a cautionary tale, because the bigger your audience, like the more people will have an opinion which is different to yours. And as we've already spoken about, those opinions, all opinions are valid, but they can be ill-informed. They can be fueled by other people's anger and frustration, and it is hard to deal with. Like, it really, really is. I care a lot about what other people think, and I don't know what that says about me. But you know, like waking up in the morning, I was in this loop, Taylor, for 2 weeks when the shit was hitting the fan with the show, where I'd wake up every single morning, the first thing I'd do, straight on Instagram, go through all these thousands of comments, then over to TikTok, then to Twitter, then I'd get on Reddit, then I'd Google any press coverage that had come out. And what I'd realised is that I'd wasted an hour of my morning doing that and set my mindset up so negatively for the rest of the day. Like, you know, I was just full of this like latent anxiety and fear, and I needed to do something quite aggressive with it and actually speak to my therapist and be like, look, I need you to tell me how I start my day. And this is from someone who I hope has had a bit of self-awareness. So like, it's difficult to deal with. The flip side of it is that it also gives this opportunity. And the amazing thing about social media, as we all know, is that you can build an audience from scratch, and there are always people that are going to be there who are willing to listen to what you want to talk about. And, you know, I really, really hope that I'm not after like Boohoo deals off the back of this. I'm too old for Boohoo anyway. I'm probably too old for every fucking branded collab. But I really hope that there is an audience out there.
Never say never. Never say never.
I'm probably more like Giacomo or Marks and Spencer's.
Marks and Spencer's is bad.
They're actually smashing it at the moment. They did some stuff with Mark
really nice
Wright,
fits.
I think. Yeah, no, they are. They're good. If
they're listed.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, that's my opinion on it. Like the flip side of it is that, you know, is an amazing platform to reach people and hopefully like help people or give people a bit of purpose.
Well, you kind of said it with like the mantra stuff. Like, you know, you end your day by, you know, your kind of you're practicing this, like you're saying these kind of like nice things about yourself, just to kind of give yourself that little bit of I guess, bit of peace and a little bit of kindness that obviously you're showing so many of the people now. But I imagine when you're going through and you're seeing these like thousands of comments, the same way that you're kind of going through those mantras, you are going to start to think that, you are going to start to believe what these people are kind of saying. I mean, some of it, obviously, you've said yourself, like you're very reflective, like you're owning that I made mistakes. This is what I've done. But also, it's a very human thing to make mistakes. That's how we learn. We're supposed to fail. We're supposed to go wrong, because otherwise, again, going back to the whole ego thing, how do we get better? But I don't agree with, because all it would take one day is that one comment. If you're having an awful day anyway, and you don't know of that thread, how far you're going to pull on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think everyone's aware of, some of the like pre-reality TV contestants in the past from the likes of Love Island. Like some of them have, I think one of them took their own life, and
Yeah.
that's how far it can go with it. Because I suppose the nature of reality TV is that you are presenting a version of yourself which is real, and so when people are commenting as a cast member, as a contestant, you're like, they're commenting who I am as a person. They're not, if Zac Efron's in Greatest Showman and people are like, his pants are too tight, then it's about the person he's portraying, not him himself.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's the difficulty. And it's one thing that I think there's this real trend at the moment, particularly amongst slightly younger people, that I just want to go on reality TV and be famous. And
yeah,
it's not really like that at all. Like it's not going to be the thing which gives you purpose or drive or panders to your ego at all. It can be a real double-edged sword.
I've got two questions on that I've kind of popped in, and one that I probably should have asked the first, but you've probably sick to the back teeth of being asked this question. But what was the driving force to apply and like to go on it?
I'll try and give you a slightly different view, so you got some fresh content, Taylor. But like, look, I think all of the cast members were in pretty similar boats. At least the ones that went on it, I think, for genuine reasons. And that was, I'd had 6 years of being single after a big breakup, right? And I live in London. The dating scene here is kind of materialistic. It's very transient. It's very casual. And in the age of dating apps, you have so much choice. And I'm not saying this necessarily just sitting on one side of the fence here as a victim. I'm saying it from my own personal perspective as well, where like I might match with someone on a dating app and be like, I'm going to go on a date with that person because they kind of like attractive and I buy into what their profile says and their conversation is good. And then you match with someone else, so you're like, I think that person's slightly more attractive than the person that I've agreed to go on a date with. And then before you know it, you're talking to 4 or 5 people. You're not investing in one person, not giving them a chance. And man, like, honestly, I had a long time going through this loop. And I was like, why can't I meet the right person? And I realized that it wasn't them that was the problem. It was me. And I was like, I need to completely change my whole mindset and my approach to this. And I'd just been through, that difficult period that I referenced with my parents. I'd changed my job. So I'd gone from, being a director at a big PR agency and working my guts out to doing more consultancy stuff and having more flexibility. And then the show came about and it was this like hallelujah moment where I was like, that concept is absolutely right and what we should all be doing. So I'm gonna say yes to the casting process.
To be fair, I think it's a really nice, and it makes sense, to be fair, from every bit of conversation. I'm kind of glad I asked that like towards like the back end of the episode, because I feel like I've got this whole new almost like context of as to why. And it wasn't just like, oh yeah, like I wanted to go on and do this. Like it almost made sense for you to go on this to kind of take everything away that you'd learned so far.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
No, mate, I appreciate the question because, it was almost like the crescendo of my little mini journey at that point. And, sadly it didn't work out because I'm still single. But like I said, even just as a learning experience, like those learnings I took from it about my judgmental character and my ego were probably learnings I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have been on the show.
You've kind of just asked the second part of the question.
Sorry.
No, you've kind of just answered the second part of the question I was going to ask. about like if the opportunity came around again, would you go on it again, or like would you do things differently? And I don't want to kind of put words into your mouth, but obviously there's a lot of lessons and I think a lot of positives that are
Yeah,
actually have come from this.
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, it's a difficult question because if I was to go on it again, I probably wouldn't have said some of the more controversial things that I said. It was really
Mm.
interesting actually because one of the other lads was I was chatting to him at a press junket we did a couple of weeks ago, and we were sort of talking about the dynamic of finances and relationships, and my belief in fair contribution and that sort of stuff. And he was like, bro, like I agree with you completely, but I wouldn't have said it. And I was like, why not? Like
Yeah,
that's who you are. And the only thing that I wanted to be at all times was completely honest and authentic to who I am. And sadly, like sometimes you're going to get shit for that, and that's kind of what my journey was. So I'm proud of what I did on the show, and
yeah,
like I said, I would do it again, and I'd probably, well, absolutely, still try and be the most credible and authentic version of myself.
yeah. Fair play. Fair play. Honestly, mate, this is kind of not necessarily not what I expected, but like you've actually really held a mirror up today. I think I'm a big believer in you having these kind of conversations at the exact time that you're supposed to have them. And you've really kind of, I guess, took the stigma away of talking about ego, and like long may it continue with the conversations that you're having and on this journey that you're quite clearly on. Um we do talk about music quite a lot on the show. Like music is one of my biggest coping mechanisms, and
Yeah. Okay.
like
Good.
you're kind of like you're smiling back at me now, so I feel like okay, so you're there as well. There's a few questions around music that I do love to ask, just because I think I'm just nosy. To be fair, I was going to try and think of some kind of like some really glorified way of saying that. It's just I'm nosy, and I'm always looking for new playlists. But if there was a movie made of your life so far, and obviously or years to come, in fact, no, right now, if there was a Tom movie made, what song would be playing as the credits rolled?
So I've got to disappoint you. My music taste is so bad. It's literally appalling. Like my friends rip the shit out of me for how bad it is. So I'm going to give you an honest answer, but I don't, please don't take the piss out of me.
Mate, you're speaking to someone whose number one artist year in, year out is Pitbull. So you're in you're in safe company, my friend.
See, that's my jam. Like I'm a massive boy band fan, and could
Yeah.
literally like word for word name you every single song and the lyrics from Backstreet Boys' Black and Blue album, 1996. So like,
Wow.
it's
Okay.
weird, but do you know what? To answer your question, there's a song by Tupac called Changes, and I think the original was done by someone else, and it's just an absolute banger, and it always gets me going.
Yeah.
And it's all about society changing, and I could give you every single lyric to that one because it's a banger, but it's an amazing tune, so I'd like to take that one.
Do you know what? It's a strong choice, and I
Thanks, man.
respect it. I mean, you had more respect if you came in and said like everybody's like
What,
no,
free to wear sunscreen?
Backstreet's back.
Oh, right, yeah.
She's back. I forgot the title of the song and actually went to start singing it. So on the back of that, obviously you've worked in PR, you're in London, so I imagine you've been invited to some pretty wild parties. Is there a song that needs to be playing that's going to guarantee you up on that dance floor?
I'm going to give you a Backstreet Boys song. I'm sorry, but probably
respect it.
Everybody by the Backstreet Boys. Everybody. It's just such a banger. And like the moves are so simple to learn, and so yeah, probably Everybody.
Do you know, I always thought that was like a Halloween song because of
It
the music
is.
video.
And we are coming into that season now, so
It's exactly
watch
timely.
out dance floors.
On the flip side of that, is there a song that kind of when you're having one of those days that you like to sit out the window, the rain's pouring down, pretend you're in a music video, kind of really brings the feels out?
All right, I got a weird one for you. And again, these are all, do you know what? I know that you sent me these before.
Use your laugh then.
Yeah.
Let me laugh.
There's a song, right, where there's a movie called Ghost. And I just love old
Okay.
romantic shit. And there's a movie called Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore in it. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
clay seed.
Yeah, the clay scene.
Yeah.
And
So I
that's
remember
accompanied by a song called Unchained Melody. And it's
melody.
just the most beautiful song, and I love it. Although Robson and Jerome did a version of it in the 90s, and it was number one for like 14 weeks. And I
Yeah.
just remember watching Top of the Pops every week, being like, not this fucking song again.
Do you know what's really embarrassing? I also remember that Gareth Gates did a version of that song.
Actually, my favourite of the versions
Was Gareth Gates.
Yeah, love him. Love Gareth.
Oh, well, this is a first.
Well, can we edit this bit out?
No. You signed the contract.
Authentic and credible.
Exactly. And to be fair, there's one thing that does really grind my gear is music snobs. Like, right. if it gets you through your day, it gets you through that workout, it puts a smile on your face, it reminds you of a certain time. Like, there's no one, again, to say that you shouldn't be listening to that, or you should, like, if it puts a smile on your face, that's what it's about.
100%. Honestly, the music I listen to more than any other music is classical movie soundtracks, like Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
That is just a jam. And like, whenever I'm working hard on a proposal or a big document, I'm like, smash it out with the help of Hans.
Honestly, next time you journal it, do it to the Interstellar soundtrack.
Yeah, beautiful. Honestly, that's a great shout.
See,
there you go.
I knew we'd be best friends. I know that sounds like really nice and positive and stuff about like the music, but is there a song, there's no beef involved in this, is there a song that you would like to wrap in chains, kick to the bottom of the ocean, never hear again?
I can't really think of anything. So like the only probably anything by like Gary Glitter or one of the other song writers or singers that have now been done for hideous sex crimes would probably be my outtake.
Yeah, I mean, fair.
You can edit
not where I thought you were going. It's up to you, to be fair. You're the PR guy. Do you want me to say that?
I have no issue with people knowing that. No, I've got no issue with people knowing that I hate Gary Glitter. That's fine.
No, it's fair.
So.
Not a very nice man, obviously.
No,
so no, I respect it. Tom, you have been genuinely. It's been a privilege to actually sit down and have this conversation with you, because it's so refreshing. Like, I've done this for quite a long time now from a podcast point of view, and I think it's just because of where I'm at the moment in terms of like ego, and like I'm kind of really understanding what like being a man looks like in this kind of like modern day and age, and to have this kind of conversation who's someone who's clearly on that like a very similar journey to me, it's been an absolute privilege, mate. So I can't thank you enough for joining me for Waffle. And yeah, I'm a fan now, so I'll fight the trolls for you.
Thanks to honestly Taylor. Like your sentiment is completely reciprocated. You're an absolute legend, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Anytime. You'll have to come back now for like part 6 and 7.
I'd love to. Honestly, we can just put the world to rights over a waffle.